In 2025, a company most people still know for smartphones did something the world's top hypercar makers thought was impossible. Its electric sedan beat a $3 million Rimac Nevera Time Attack around the most dangerous racetrack on Earth. The gap was only 0.3 of a second, but the message was clear. The future of performance cars may not come from traditional supercar brands. It may come from somewhere nobody expected. Here is the part that should genuinely concern performance car engineers in Stuttgart, Woking, and Maranello. This was not some stripped-down prototype built only to chase a record, running on special tires with unnecessary weight removed and a cabin redesigned purely for speed. This was the actual production version of the car, the same model a customer can walk into a showroom and purchase. That means the achievement was not just a demonstration of engineering potential. It was proof that the technology had already reached a level where a road-legal, customer-ready vehicle could compete at the highest level of performance. A buyer in Beijing, or anywhere else where the car is sold, can own essentially the same machine that set the record. And it did not just defeat the Rimac. It also surpassed the Porsche Taycan Turbo GT, a vehicle developed by one of the most respected performance brands in the world and previously recognized as the fastest four-door production vehicle of any kind, electric or combustion-powered, around the Nürburgring. A family sedan had now entered a category once reserved for million-dollar hypercars and factory-built track machines. Think about how unusual that statement really is. Rimac built its entire company around a single mission: creating the fastest electric cars on the planet, with every engineering decision focused on extracting maximum performance from electric power. There was no long history of economy models, commercial vehicles, or unrelated products. Speed was the entire identity of the brand. Porsche, meanwhile, has spent nearly 8 decades building its reputation around performance engineering, with the Nürburgring serving as one of the ultimate proving grounds for its most advanced machines. Generations of engineers have used that track to demonstrate what their cars can achieve under extreme conditions. And yet, in a single afternoon, both benchmarks were challenged and surpassed by a company that did not even exist as an automaker 5 years earlier. A brand that had no racing legacy, no decades of sports car development, and no history of building performance vehicles suddenly entered the same conversation as some of the most respected names in the automotive world. The result was not just a record lap, it was a sign that the traditional hierarchy of performance engineering was beginning to change. To understand how a phone company just did what Porsche and Rimac could not stop, you have to understand who is actually building this car. A phone company that builds cars the way it builds phones. Most people in the West still know Xiaomi primarily as a smartphone company, a brand associated with affordable electronics rather than high-performance vehicles. That perception may soon become a problem for the traditional auto industry, because Xiaomi did not accidentally create a fast car through a lucky combination of parts. The company approached automotive engineering with the same strategy that helped it become one of the world's largest consumer technology companies. The SU7 Ultra was developed around a philosophy familiar to the electronics world: control the software, control the hardware, and keep ownership of the technologies that define the user experience. Instead of simply assembling components from outside suppliers, Xiaomi focused on integrating the systems that directly affect performance, efficiency, and driver interaction. It is the same approach that allowed technology companies to reshape industries once dominated by established names. By treating the car less like a traditional machine and more like a connected performance platform, Xiaomi entered a market where century-old brands assumed experience alone would be enough to maintain their advantage. The SU7 Ultra suggests that the next generation of automotive competition may not just be between car companies, but between different philosophies of engineering. There is a detail about this car that many people have never heard, and it did not come from a Chinese media outlet trying to promote Xiaomi. It came from one of the company's own competitors. Ford CEO Jim Farley imported a Xiaomi SU7 into the United States and spent 6 months driving it privately, studying how the vehicle performed and what made it different from traditional cars. According to reports, Farley told his own staff that he did not want to give the car back, a surprising reaction from the leader of one of America's largest automotive companies. This was not a casual test drive or a public relations event. It was a competitor examining a rival product closely, trying to understand the technology, design choices, and user experience that Chinese automakers were bringing to the market. For decades, many Western manufacturers viewed Chinese cars primarily through the lens of cost rather than innovation. But reactions like this suggest the competition has shifted. The challenge is no longer just producing vehicles at lower prices. It is creating products that can compete in software, performance, and overall engineering. That makes this moment less about marketing hype and more about a major industry player recognizing that the gap is changing. The SU7 Ultra is built on Xiaomi's own 800-volt electrical architecture called Modena, and Xiaomi designed the tri-motor powertrain in-house rather than buying it from a supplier the way most automakers do. That single decision is why the numbers on this car do not look like they belong on a four-door sedan. There is also a sensor decision buried in this car worth pausing on. Xiaomi equipped the SU7 Ultra with LiDAR alongside a full suite of high-resolution cameras and ultrasonic sensors for its driver assistance system, at a time when Tesla, the company most associated with this segment, moved away from LiDAR entirely to cut manufacturing costs. Xiaomi went the opposite direction, choosing to keep the more expensive sensor rather than strip it out of a mainstream production car. That is the same instinct a phone company applies when deciding which camera hardware goes into a flagship device instead of a budget one, just aimed at a completely different product. The record nobody in Europe saw coming. The Nürburgring Nordschleife is 12.9 miles long, contains 73 corners, and has spent nearly 8 decades becoming the ultimate proving ground for performance cars. For European manufacturers especially, this stretch of German asphalt is treated almost like sacred ground. A fast lap here is not just a number, it is a public statement that a vehicle belongs among the world's most capable machines. For years, the benchmark for electric production cars belonged to the Porsche Taycan Turbo GT with the Weissach package. Developed by one of the most respected performance brands in history, it represented the peak of Porsche's electric engineering and carried a price tag to match. The car costs roughly $232,000 in the United States and nearly $280,000 in China, placing it firmly in the territory of high-end performance vehicles. Beating it meant more than simply setting a faster time. It meant challenging decades of racing knowledge, engineering experience, and brand reputation built around this exact track. The Nürburgring was where established manufacturers went to prove themselves, until a new player arrived and changed the conversation. In June of 2025, the production Xiaomi SU7 Ultra, fitted with an optional track package, lapped the Nordschleife in 7 minutes and 4.957 seconds. That beat the Taycan Turbo GT's time by more than 2.5 seconds. It also beat the Rimac Nevera Time Attack's 7 minutes 5.298 seconds, a car with a 7-figure price tag and a name built entirely around straight line and track dominance. The gap was just 0.3 of a second, but a 0.3 of a second gap between a $75,000 sedan and a $3 million hypercar is not a close race. It is a humiliation dressed up as a close race. Think about what each of those companies has spent decades building. Rimac was created around a singular mission, pushing electric performance to its absolute limit, with its entire identity tied to creating some of the fastest vehicles on Earth. Every major engineering decision has been focused on extracting maximum acceleration, handling, and efficiency from electric power. Porsche, meanwhile, has spent generations refining the exact areas that determine performance on a track like the Nürburgring. Suspension tuning, aerodynamic balance, braking systems, and powertrain development have been continuously improved since the 1950s, creating a level of experience few manufacturers can match. And yet, in a single attempt, Both of those benchmarks were surpassed by a company that only began selling its first production vehicle in 2024. A brand with no decades-long racing history, no established supercar reputation, and no previous track record suddenly entered a space dominated by some of the most respected names in automotive engineering. The result was not just a fast lap time. It was a demonstration that the traditional path to building a performance car was no longer the only path. Here is the detail that makes it worse for the Europeans. Xiaomi's own onboard footage from the record lap shows the car hitting 346 kilometers per hour, or about 215 miles per hour, on the long Döttinger-Hohe Strait, just short of its claimed 217 miles per hour top speed. That is not a car creeping across the finish line on a technicality. That is a sedan running at supercar speed on the same stretch of tarmac Porsche uses to sell $100,000 option packages. And Xiaomi was not finished. After proving what its production car could achieve, the company returned to the same track with a stripped-down, non-production prototype designed purely to chase performance limits. That machine recorded a 622.091 lap, improving on its own 2024 attempt by nearly 24 seconds, and placing it third on the all-time Nürburgring prototype leaderboard. The only vehicles ahead of it were not ordinary road cars, but purpose-built racing machines. Volkswagen's dedicated IDR and the outright record holder. These are vehicles created with a single objective, using extreme aerodynamics, lightweight construction, and engineering unrestricted by normal production requirements. That makes Xiaomi's achievement even more unusual. A company that entered the automotive industry only recently was suddenly competing against decades of motorsport development and specialized race engineering. A brand most people still associate with smartphones, electronics, and consumer technology had placed itself among the fastest machines ever to attack the world's most demanding circuit. It was no longer just a technology company experimenting with cars. It had become a serious performance contender. The Nürburgring was not an isolated stage either. Xiaomi's performance push continued on another major circuit, proving that the result was not simply the product of one perfect lap on one famous piece of asphalt. In February 2025, the SU7 Ultra set the fastest production car lap ever recorded at the Shanghai International Circuit, completing the course in 2 minutes, 9.944 seconds. The significance became even clearer when the comparison was made against another established performance benchmark. The Porsche Taycan Turbo GT finished second on the same day with a time of 2 minutes 11.28 seconds, more than a second slower around a circuit that Porsche itself has used for Asia-Pacific media events and performance demonstrations. A single upset can always be questioned. A new competitor defeating a long-established brand once can be explained away as the result of conditions, strategy, or an unusually strong run. But repeating the result on a different continent, on a completely different track layout, against a different set of challenges, tells a different story. The evidence begins to suggest that Xiaomi's achievement was not a one-off moment, but part of a broader shift in how quickly new automotive companies can develop high-performance electric vehicles. Numbers that belong to a hypercar, not a sedan. The performance figures underneath the SU7 Ultra explain why these lap times are not simply the result of clever marketing or a lucky run. Beneath the bodywork is a powertrain designed from the ground up to compete with the most advanced electric performance cars in the world. The car uses 3 electric motors, 2 identical units mounted on the rear axle, each producing 570 horsepower and capable of spinning up to 27,200 revolutions per minute, combined with a third motor at the front axle, producing another 387 horsepower. Together, the system delivers a staggering 1,527 horsepower and 1,770 Newton-meters of torque, numbers that place it firmly in hypercar territory rather than traditional luxury sedan territory. That power is delivered through Xiaomi's own 800-volt Modena platform, an architecture designed to support high-performance driving while also improving charging speed, efficiency, and thermal management. The important detail is that Xiaomi did not simply add a large battery and powerful motors to create a fast car in a straight line. Track performance requires controlling that power through software, chassis tuning, braking systems, and energy management. The SU7 Ultra's hardware provides the raw capability, but its ability to translate that capability into repeatable lap times is what allowed it to challenge manufacturers with decades of performance experience. 0 to 100 kilometers per hour takes just 1.98 seconds. That is not a typo, and it is not a figure normally associated with practical four-door vehicles. Numbers like that have traditionally belonged to extreme two-seat hypercars built around lightweight carbon structures, aggressive aerodynamics, and engineering compromises that prioritize speed above almost everything else. The unusual part is that the SU7 Ultra achieves this level of acceleration while remaining a usable sedan. It has 5 seats, a conventional trunk, and the practicality expected from a daily vehicle, yet it can launch from a standstill into the same acceleration category as exotic machines costing several times more. It challenges the idea that extreme performance must come with the limitations of a traditional supercar. The performance does not stop at acceleration. The car reaches a top speed of 350 kilometers per hour, or roughly 217 miles per hour, placing it among the fastest production sedans ever built. At launch, that figure made it around 12 miles per hour faster than the previous record holder for the fastest production sedan, the Maserati Ghibli 334 Ultima. What makes the achievement notable is not only the speed itself, but the fact that it came from a company that had no previous history building performance cars. Stopping a 1,527 horsepower sedan is its own engineering problem, and Xiaomi did not cut corners there either. The car comes standard with carbon ceramic brakes on all 4 corners, with 430mm front discs, the largest carbon brake rotors currently fitted to any production sedan on sale. Akebono supplies 6 piston calipers up front and 4 piston calipers at the rear. From 62 miles per hour, the car stops in about 101 feet. That is shorter stopping distance than most sports cars manage, on a car that can seat a family of 5. This is the part that should be genuinely uncomfortable for anyone whose business depends on building performance cars. For decades, numbers like these were not simply specifications. They were the main reason customers paid 6-figure and even 7-figure prices for Halo models. Extreme acceleration, hypercar-level power, and record-setting top speeds were reserved for vehicles designed with almost no compromises and sold as exclusive engineering showcases. Xiaomi changed that formula by putting those same headline figures into a sedan with a base price under $75,000. More importantly, the company did not separate the most impressive technology behind expensive upgrade packages or limited editions. The performance hardware was built into the car itself, rather than being treated as an optional extra available only to a small group of buyers. That approach challenges a long-standing idea in the performance industry, that extraordinary speed must always come with extraordinary cost. By bringing hypercar-level numbers into a more accessible vehicle, Xiaomi is forcing established manufacturers to reconsider how much premium customers should actually have to pay for cutting-edge electric performance. Compare that to how a traditional manufacturer typically approaches a car like this. Carbon ceramic brakes, for example, are often treated as a premium option on European performance sedans, sometimes costing 5 figures, and reserved for buyers willing to spend extra on a feature designed for extreme driving conditions. The customer may already be paying a 6-figure price, yet still has to choose additional packages to unlock the vehicle's full performance potential. Xiaomi took a different approach. The company made those decisions during the initial engineering process, rather than leaving them as expensive upgrades added later. The braking system, power delivery, cooling, suspension tuning, and other performance components were selected around the idea that the car should be capable of being pushed hard from the beginning. That difference comes down to the philosophy behind the vehicle. Instead of creating a regular luxury sedan and building a higher performance version afterward, Xiaomi designed the SU7 Ultra around its maximum capability first. The result is a car intended to perform at its limits straight from the factory, rather than one that requires owners to keep adding options before it reaches the level advertised by its badge. Charging that keeps up with a racetrack. None of this power matters if the battery cannot survive being used the way this car is clearly built to be used. And this is where the SU7 Ultra's engineering gets genuinely strange for a road car. The battery is a CATL Kirin 2.0 pack, rated at 93.7 kilowatt-hours, capable of a 16C discharge rate, meaning it can output 1,330 kilowatts at its peak and still deliver 800 kilowatts even when the state of charge drops to 20%. Picture what that number means in practice. Most electric cars start to protect themselves the moment the battery gets hot or gets low, cutting power to preserve the cells. Xiaomi built a cooling system specifically upgraded around the compressor, water pump, cooling fan, and radiator, so the SU7 Ultra can complete 2 consecutive flat-out laps of the Nürburgring without the battery overheating and pulling power back. That is the same 2-lap benchmark Porsche uses to validate the Taycan Turbo GT and Hyundai uses for the Ioniq 5N. Except Xiaomi is hitting it on its first serious attempt at building a performance car. Charging speed follows the same philosophy. The 800-volt architecture supports a 5.2C charging rate, letting the car recover from 10 to 80% in about 11 minutes. And the battery itself carries what Xiaomi calls a bulletproof coating on its underside, engineered to increase tear and scratch resistance tenfold and puncture resistance more than 13 times over. A direct response to the very real risk of debris strikes on a car capable of 215 miles per hour on public and track surfaces alike. For everyday driving rather than lap record hunting, the same battery family delivers about 385 to 391 miles of range on the Chinese CLTC cycle, a generous test standard. But even discounted against a stricter real-world figure, this is not a pack that sacrifices daily usability to chase a track time. The lower, non-ultra versions of the SU7 lean on a more conventional lithium iron phosphate pack instead, which tells you something about how deliberately Xiaomi segmented this lineup. The everyday sedan gets a durable, slower degrading chemistry, and the Ultra gets the nickel-based pack built specifically to survive being discharged at race pace. Luxury that used to require a different logo on the hood. The parts of this car that are not about lap times are just as telling. Carbon fiber covers roughly 5.5 square meters of the SU7 Ultra between the exterior and interior, spread across 17 separate locations, including the roof, which alone saves about 12 kilograms of weight compared to a standard panel. The rear diffuser is active, with distinct road and track settings, and generates up to 285 kilograms of downforce, a figure that would have been an exotic claim on a supercar a decade ago. Step inside and the car does not feel like it made any sacrifices to hit those track numbers. Alcantara covers roughly 5 square meters of the cabin, chosen partly because it weighs about half as much as traditional leather. Both front seats are ventilated, offer 10-point massage functionality, and use graphene-based heating elements. A 25-speaker audio system, including dedicated speakers built into the driver's headrest, handles the sound. Even the badge gets the extreme treatment, finished in 24-karat gold, set against carbon fiber. None of this is a paid options package bolted onto a stripped base model. It comes standard on the car that also happens to hold a Nürburgring lap record. Why this is bigger than one lap time? Xiaomi is not treating this as a one-off flex. The company has become a member of the Nürburgring's industry pool, the same development access program used by major manufacturers to test prototypes on the circuit year-round, and the track itself has renamed one of its corners the Xiaomi Curve. That is not a marketing rumor. That is the Nürburgring, an institution that has spent decades being extremely selective about which manufacturers it publicly aligns itself with, choosing to permanently associate part of its own geography with a 5-year-old car company. The commercial numbers back up the engineering claim. When Xiaomi opened orders for the SU7 Ultra, it received more than 3,680 reservations within 10 minutes of the announcement. Goldman Sachs initially projected total 2025 sales in the range of 4,000 units, a forecast that looked conservative almost immediately given the order pace. This is not a low-volume trophy car built to win one headline and then disappear. It is a business Xiaomi intends to scale. Here is the uncomfortable math for the legacy players. The standard SU7 Ultra starts at roughly 529,900 yuan, close to $73,740 at recent exchange rates. Add Xiaomi's optional track package, priced at about 100,000 yuan, or roughly $13,950, and total pricing lands around $88,000. Even the ultra-exclusive Nürburgring Limited Edition, loaded with the most extreme aerodynamic and cooling hardware, comes in near $114,000. Every single one of those configurations still undercuts the Porsche Taycan Turbo GT Weissach, a car it already beat on the same racetrack. Xiaomi has also made it clear this is not staying confined to one body style. The company later brought the same record-hunting approach to its YU7 GT Performance SUV, sending it around the Nordschleife in 7 minutes 34.931 seconds to claim the outright production SUV lap record, displacing an Audi RSQ8 time that had itself only recently taken the record from a Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT coupe. Sedans, SUVs, it does not seem to matter which segment Xiaomi enters. The pattern is the same: arrive late, undercut the price, and leave with the lap record anyway. The wall this car still has to get through. None of this means Xiaomi is about to take over Western driveways next year. The United States currently applies a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles, which means the SU7 Ultra has zero legal path to an American showroom floor at anything close to its Chinese price. Industry analysts have noted that even if Xiaomi were forced to charge $150,000 for the car in the US to absorb that tariff, it would still land about $80,000 cheaper than the Taycan Turbo GT it already beat around the Nürburgring. There are real unresolved questions that go beyond price. Xiaomi has no US crash test data, no established American service network, and none of the decades-long ownership track record that legacy brands lean on when a buyer is making a six-figure decision. Those are not small obstacles. A car is a long-term commitment, and trust takes years to build, not a single lap time. Xiaomi's own history outside cars adds a second layer of caution here. This is a company whose reputation was built on smartphones, and a smartphone that fails costs a customer a few $100s and an afternoon of frustration. A car that fails at 200 miles per hour is a completely different category of risk, and Xiaomi is still in its first few years of proving it can carry that responsibility at scale, across millions of miles of ordinary driving, rather than a single carefully prepared record lap. But notice what kind of problem that is. It is a problem of market access, ownership history, and long-term reliability data, not a problem of whether the underlying engineering is real. The Nürburgring lap time already answered that question, on the record, in front of the same institution that validated Porsche and Rimac for decades. Whatever happens with tariffs, service networks, or Western brand trust, that lap time does not get slower. The story underneath the SU7 Ultra is not really about one lap record. It is about what happens when a company with no automotive history, no legacy supplier relationships, and no decades of racing heritage decides to build a car with the same vertical control it uses to build a phone, and then sends it to the one place on Earth where every performance claim gets tested in public. Jim Farley did not need a spreadsheet to understand what that meant. He just kept the keys for 6 months. There are more videos like this on screen right now. If you like uncovering hidden truths, subscribe and join us again soon.